Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. And today I am very pleased to present the esteemed, the legend, Dr. Alan H. Greenfield. Dr. Greenfield is an American-born occultist and author long involved in the worldwide free and luminist movement. He was given the mystical title and charter as Tal Sur Hasirim in 1986 and 1991 by Hierophant Michael Bertial. I probably screwed that up. Sorry, Alan. You can correct me when you come on. He is a longtime student of esoteric spirituality and Gnosticism, a study he began in 1960, and is an avid speaker on subjects related to UFOs and the occult, especially Ordo Templi Orientis and Thelema. Alan, welcome, my friend.
Glad to be here. Sean, you do a great program anyway, but with me on it, I'll try to keep it from going down the drain.
Alan, it cannot go down the drain. Lord knows where we're going to go with this, because I think we're going to get into egregors and thought forms at some point, and I think, yeah, I think you can read between the lines when it comes to YouTube and broadcasting.
I have
the
power.
You certainly probably do. So okay, so I had to cut poor Alan off because we were about to have a late start, but I don't generally do this, but I think Alan will be able to provide his expertise on a rather strange esoteric topic. So Alan's going to have to suffer through this story. I'll try to make it very quick. Okay. So on August 22nd of this year, I started seeing a bunch of synchronistic numbers to, 616, 656, 222, 333, those sorts of things. Every time I looked up my cell phone, I felt a calling to go out, and just a knowing I had to go out into the, hiking. I hadn't been hiking in a very long time, but I got all my work done, went out pretty late at twilight, hiked around until it was not pitch black, but very dark. There was, no moon out at the time. And then on the way back, as I'm often wont to do, I encountered an owl, great horned owl, just standing on a branch. I had, a few moments to interact with it. It was as the owl flies about 20 feet diagonally from me, about 5 to 10 feet up off the ground on a kind of a felled tree stump, basically. Not a stump, but part of a felled tree. It was a branch. So I went home 2 days later on the 24th. There's a little thing I've been experimenting with. It could all be correlation, right? I'm not implying it's causation. It could be causation, but I'm not implying. But there's a little technique I tried that is somewhat akin to remote viewing, where I imagine a bird, particularly the first time I've done it was a raven. Imagine on a branch somewhere in my local area. I imagine looking through its eyes and kind of coming to my house, and generally something to entice it, like give it a reason to be there. The raven, when I tried it, I don't think I really did that part. So faster than you can order a pizza, after I did that, about 10 to 20 minutes elapsed. I heard a squawking behind me, and there was a raven sitting up on a branch, visibly trying to get my attention. So I tried it a subsequent time. That was not on August 24th. That was several months before that. I tried it again, no effect. Nothing happened, several days or weeks after that. Then on the 24th, kind of 2 days after this event in the park, I tried to do it with an owl. And this time, not only did I imagine the owl, the location, how to get to my house through its eyes, but also looked at, imagine something to entice it. So I just imagined my yard was crawling with mice. And I also kind of, in my mind's eye, projected 3 pitch perfect owl hoots. Okay. Great horned owl specifically. So within 5 to 10 minutes, there was an owl on my back fence. And I didn't tell you this part, Alan, but there was on the same spot earlier that day, a hawk had landed there I didn't do any of this stuff, but it was like the same place a hawk had landed earlier that day. So after that, I was, the owl subsequently left. I was so excited, I called a friend. And about 5 to 10 minutes later, the same owl wheeled around, landed on a redwood tree directly in front of me. The instant it landed, my call cut out. I mean, instant, same instant it landed. And the owl looked down at me, hooted 3 times. Obviously, I scrambled for my phone, got a picture of it flying away, but it flew away. So the long and short of it is, Alan, what the hell is going on here?
Well, I can venture a guess, although if there's a message in it, it's for you, not for me. So, there will be limitations. I need to say, as a sort of prelude to my little analysis, that I think that I'm more than think. I'm pretty sure that reality is a lot more malleable than we generally realize. I base that in part on people's experiences similar to yours, but also on some laboratory parapsychology experiences, which show that you can bend reality. Well, if you can bend it, then perhaps you are co-creating it as you go along. So that's my general premise. Birds have going back to the Romans at least, actually earlier, but we're not going to do the history lesson today, I suppose. They have a particular significance in augurs and portents. Of course, they usually cut them up and analyze them that way, but I prefer.
This is orthomancy, right?
Yeah, but they also are going as far back, I think it's the Babylonians, and that means probably the Sumerians, which is as far back as you can go without just literally digging up previous non-understood civilizations, which they seem to be doing in Turkey right now, for better or worse. Mm-hmm. Finally, they get to the Empire State Building, and they say, "What?" But birds tend to be augurs of what is to come, and the great horned owl, more so than any other bird, is a symbol of the goddess Minerva, but also of apparitions to come, kind of like in Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Jacob Marley comes to him first and said, "There will all be 3 apparitions." And said, "Yeah, well, you're not. I assume you're not stingy enough to get that particular one." But the owl seems to have been, unless skeptic hat on, unless you see owls all the time.
I see owls fairly often. By the way, a few nights later, there was one that returned to the house around kind of, I don't know, mid 3 a.m. I'm just estimating, hooted, and then returned, prior to dawn, hooted again before leaving. So I've seen more owls in the last 2 years of my life than I've seen the rest of my life combined.
Well, that may be. Have you moved?
Not recently, but in the area where I live, there are definitely great horned owls where I live. It's not like
yeah.
But let's just say I began to notice them in the last 2 years.
Well, I can do the call of a great horned owl perfectly. It's just something I learned along the way. And about 5 years ago, there was a great horned owl on my back porch. That was not here in Atlanta. That was up in down in Ackworth, Georgia, which I was then in. And so I began to call to the owl, and it came back night after night. And my wife says, "Stop doing that. That owl is looking for a mate, and it's mistaking you for something that it can mate with, and you're going to call that they're rare enough around here." So I stopped doing it. But that's a rarity around here, and unknown when you get down into Atlanta. No wildlife larger than a chipmunk really ventures down here because it's a really big, sprawling city. Although I'm out every night walking around, and up until this year, I would always cross paths with small mammals, we'll say. This year, all I got so far was a lizard crossing my path repeatedly, night after night after night. So very small lizard too. So I don't even know what it was because it was too small and it was too fast. So anyway, I will say the owl was a symbol of, hey, Sean, we're about to show you something. The raven is a synchronicity with me because a couple of days ago, which means in the same time frame that you summon the raven or try to, I was doing some research on the mythological, and I use that term in the Campbell sense, not in the sense of, fantasy. And I was looking into the fact that ravens are often associated with Odin, and Odin had ravens on his shoulder that he would send off to see what reality was looking like. And that's a very, very rich symbol. And I came across a thing on my daily jaunt onto X, formerly Twitter. And there was an entry that made a reference that I thought was appropriate. So my answer to it, right out of Poe, my father was a big Poe fan, was nevermore. And it was sort of a non sequitur, but my, I don't want to say followers, that sounds like something from Terminator. And then but people that follow
your associates, your associates,
my esteemed associates,
friends of the family, friends of the family. Friends of ours.
Yeah, our good friends out there who probably are watching right now. Hi, folks! Shout out! Hey, I'm available, as the hooker on the street corner said. Yeah. So, Nevermore was like, I was dismissive of the notion that they were propounding. That was like the same day that you saw the raven. I mean, I can't coordinate it because I would have to go back through my feed and see if it was time stamped or something. But it was awfully close. It was within a day or two. And the ability to call anything in the physical world. Again, I'm not so sure that there is a physical world in the sense that we generally accept it. I think there may be something more in the nature of what our senses conjure up out of some sort of plasticity of reality. Oh, somebody said my audio was a bit foggy. Oh, I'm Mr. Ed.
I think it's more. I think it's more in line with your connection. I don't think it's the. I don't think it's the audio. I think it's the connection is a little choppy.
Well, I was about to give the secret of reality, which is, and that's it. There's nothing more to it.
I bet you there's somebody out there who thinks you actually said that and you got cut off. But well, let's just we'll let them suffer.
It wasn't Sean that cut me off. It was the guys in St. Petersburg, Russia, who don't want you to know the truth, or it was the Black Lodge. But to understand that, you need to read my book, plug number one. So the rest of it was you're having command over the elements, but instead of in the sense that magicians conjure things up from other worlds, other flesh, as George Williamson poetically put it, it's something quite physical, and it bears that signature. And then, of course, you see a plethora of owls, and for the last couple of months, which could itself be an augur of something is about to happen. And I would say, and this is just snap judgment, because you told me the bare bones of this story right before we went on the air, but given that caveat that this is bare bones assessment of a story I just heard, I would say that you may be on the verge of some really big contact with the secret chiefs, which is something that tends to happen whenever I do radio, TV, podcasts, or whatever. Usually it comes in the form of complaints, like, I couldn't hear anything that you're saying. But
I mean, that's one of the reasons this is one of the reasons I reached out to you to interview you, to kind of get I'm trying to get multiple perspectives on this, but I thought you'd be you are uniquely qualified to offer an hypothesis. And by the way, it's not just ravens and owls. During this past week, there's hawks, there's red-tailed hawks around here too. They would screech. I would go outside, and in 2 days consecutively. And this was in the last week, so it was not the same time period as I think the owl was the week before that. But there would be 3 of them screeching, circling the house. And then the second day there were 2. Just kind of like a countdown or something.
Yeah, that could be.
And then
are the symbol, especially for Thelemites, which I used to be, is the symbol of Horus, the god of the new eon. So that could be a confirmation that this is not from the Black Lodge, this is from the secret chiefs. Of course, we could bring...
I didn't even know that was a possibility, Alan.
Oh, it's a possibility. It depends on a lot of factors, but you have to judge it based on the effect on you. Mm-hmm. If it seems really good and positive and useful, it's probably the secret chiefs or some lesser beings or some higher beings. But if it seems to be at first, hey, this is great, but what you're going to have to do, and there's some kind of hook in it, it's probably the Black Lodge. They will try to throw you off, and they only do that to people who are the current term is internet influencers. So I would say we both fall into that category, for better or worse. In my case, far worse. But perhaps it's an effort to enhance your communication with your audience, and perhaps it's an effort to divert you into the role. You just have to make a value judgment
Mhm.
of the information that you get. But that's definitely what hawks symbolize. And people say, well, it was hawks real, if you had put out your arm, you might be involved in hunting, or it might be hunting you. But I see these things as material symbols of esoteric, non-material things, because I think that, again, reality is far more malleable and plastic in the sense of moldable. Moldable. Is that a word? Moldable. Are you
Sure.
moldable? So,
Malleable. Yeah, malleable is, works. Moldable.
it's ginger teeth, folks. My voice will go gravelly sooner or later. And I do
Yeah, you
talk
got to
too
keep
much.
drinking the. No, you don't. The more you talk, the less I have to talk. And people don't want to hear me; they want to hear you. I talk too much at the very beginning. I'll get complaints. You watch. It's
Okay.
about me, not you.
Well,
Complaints.
that's okay. It's not like nobody ever criticizes me.
That's why I'm real quick. I'm in there and out. I'm in and out, Alan. Boom, boom, boom. That's the story. I'm out.
Okay. That's a wise decision. So I think all of this is a prelude to something else. And I even will go so far and say audaciously enough that I think my being on with you this evening is part of that prelude. In other words, I'm tipping you off to what it is, which is what you wanted me to do, and more to come, I suspect.
Yeah, and this, like I said, this has been going on for ever since I started this channel. These things have started. I don't want to use the word. Manifestation is about the only thing I can use that. But these things have been manifesting, whatever they are, in increasing frequency ever since I began. I'll give you another quick example about dreams. Right. I had an odd dream. I'll be very quick. It doesn't matter what happened in the dream, but at the end of the dream, I heard a voice that said, "Remember these words." The first word was audible. It's not a word. I couldn't find it. I looked it up, but it was shamanus is what I heard audibly, right? So shaman is a word, but shamanus with a US, I couldn't find any detail of it. But then the second word was written, and it was JYBRIL. At the time, I had no idea what that word means. There's no such word if you look it up, if you spell it that way. But if you spell it, if you just replace the Y with an I and then just pronounce it, or if you just pronounce the JYBRIL, it's Jabril. So I had no idea what that word was. I looked it up, and look, I'm not like I was raised Catholic, but I'm not like a practicing Catholic or anything like that. So this is I look at this as in terms of symbols and not kind of religious iconography, but there is religious iconography. So if you look up Jabril, it is the Islamic word for the Archangel Gabriel. Okay. If you're a Catholic, Gabriel is the patron saint of messengers. If you do a little bit further research, he's the patron saint of broadcasters. So that's it. That's all I have to work with. It's very strange. I don't have a messianic complex. It was just a very strange dream to learn about a word that I've never seen before that had that level of significance. So I have no idea if it's tied into any of this. I don't know why this is happening, but it's just another kind of data point that's out there. I don't know what it means.
People who have branch channel communications, which you're getting close to there, boy, very close actually, and people who have abduction experiences where there is interaction, sometimes rather disastrous interaction with purported beings from purported planets.
Mhm.
They get names of the mysterious individuals. The favorite, of course, is Indrid Cold, but there are lots of others. There's two things you can do with it other than, taking it literally. One is to run it through the secret cipher, the UFOnauts, which you can do fairly easily. Go to the
I think I ran
See-
Shamanist. I think I ran Shamanist through it, and that's an even weirder. I don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
It's like it's like
Well,
the same letters as like Jesus. Like that's how ridiculous it is. Like
that's not ridiculous because Jesus is the same as Orthon, which was George Adamski's primary contact,
mhm.
which I think was his repackaging something that actually happened to him in the early 1940s. But well, that's a whole story in itself. Read the book on the Black Lodge that I wrote with my publisher.
Yeah.
That's a trip and a
Secrets
half.
of the Black Lodge, right? And you can get it on Amazon for sure. And they should also
Secrets
read.
of
I
the
have it here.
Secrets of the Real Black Lodge Revealed.
I'm trying to like. I have like this thing's being blocked, but the complete secret cipher of the UFOnauts. You should also get.
Yeah, well, actually, I prefer, not that I'm trying to sell books, but I prefer people to read the Secret Cipher and Secret Rituals, or the complete Secret Cipher, which is both books, before they read the Black Lodge books. It's okay, they stand alone, but the context matters, and if you get the context, it makes broader sense because it says some pretty outrageous things. I mean, I don't usually do collaborations, but I collaborated with my publisher on
Olaf. Right.
on that. Yeah, Olaf, and it's a very strange book, and it talks about things that usually don't get talked about, even in magical circles. They used to be up until around 1920, and then they stopped being talked about. I guess because the whole idea of the occult and magic is kooky enough as it is, and there's this long dark age between, let's say, the end of World War I and the psychedelic revolution of the late 1960s, where there was a renewed interest in this stuff. It's kind of died down since then, and in fact, literally, a lot of the movers and shakers of that period have, gone on onto that great flying saucer in the sky or wherever they go. Reminds me of a joke that I'm not going to tell because it's about Catholics, but
That's all right. You're not going to insult me. I'm an Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
We can be, you could say I'm drunk, whatever. I'm not, but it's common. But the Irish like to drink.
Look, I'm not going to do politics on the show unless you want to do politics. But
that's
during the troubles in Northern Ireland, I was doing a lot of work for what was called the Irish Northern Aid, which was in fact
I know all about it.
running guns and anything else to the IRA. So
yeah, my father made. Well, I'm not saying he made a donation, but anyway.
I was encouraging donations. I'm not saying I made a donation.
I'm not saying he did either. I'm just
during St. Patrick's Day every year, I would take a balloon and a transmitter up to Mount Arabia, my power spot, raise the balloon, and the IRA free channel from Atlanta would go on with a number of rousing songs up the Republic, down the Brits. Don't tell my English friends that I did.
Yeah, I have a friend who is like a hardcore para guy. Like those are the unit that fired on the crowd at Bloody Sunday. He was
Oh,
same unit. He wasn't there for that, but he so I made him upset once when I said 13 gone but not forgotten. We got 18 in one pot, and he did not like that. Did not like that. Anyway, we shouldn't. I'm Switzerland here. I'm in America. Like it's a messy thing, right? There's good people on both sides of that conflict, and you know, but
well,
you know,
the thing is, Ulster is a kind of artificial country.
Yeah.
And if you look at Ireland from a God's eye view or a satellite's eye view, it's just one island there. And England is the only country that would give up Hong Kong to the communist Chinese, but keep Northern Ireland as civilized as you can get. So that's in
they're closer.
my editorial.
They're closer to home. They're closer to home.
Well,
That's
yeah,
fine.
but we're closer to home over here, and we sort of took umbrage at the British Empire back in the day. And let's change the subject before we lose all of our...
and harm someone's delicate sensibilities. Okay, all right. So I should expect, or there may be more to come. I mean, I'm not gonna. We can talk afterwards. I can tell you about. I'm starting to have some weird dreams where you notice somebody in there that's not supposed to be in there. And
let me ask you the question.
Like, what are you doing here?
Let me ask you the question that I'm a skeptic back on that I always ask the experiencers. How do you know how the words were spelled? If you hear,
I could see them in the dream.
No.
I heard the first word. I saw the second one. So the first word was shamanis. I heard that audibly in the dream, and then I saw Jibril spelled out in the dream.
I mean, there's a philosopher, Khalil Gibran, which is pretty close. But if you don't hear the spelling or see the spelling or write it down, how do you know how it's spelled? Because one letter off will throw the cipher off. And there's another way to analyze it too, which is often, this just happened to me yesterday with some of the people on the ALW cipher group on Facebook. The brilliant host of that site ran the word creamed corn. I don't know why he ran those words, but I ran it through an anagram analyzer, and it comes out necromancer. And I thought, whoa, whoa. That's what I call a hit. If it's something way off, like, but I don't know the basis for his running that term in the first place. I just think of cream corn as something to throw into the cornbread mix because I'm from the South and we do that sort of thing. But it was a very interesting synchronicity, and it works very well in the secret cipher as well.
And to be clear, I didn't feed Jibril through the cipher. I only fed Shamanis through the cipher because I didn't see any other meaning outside of Shamanis. I didn't know how to interpret it. So
it could be divided into syllables. Shaman us.
Yeah.
As in, we're the secret chiefs. We know the answers. Or we are a group of shamans communicating to you. Shaman, us.
Or U.S. shaman.
Well,
United States
No, when I think about that, I think about the guy with the horns in the Congress who I think he's out of jail now. So
QAnon, yeah,
I'm the
QAnon shaman.
U.S. shaman. Okay.
QAnon shaman, yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah, that was
QAnon and QAnon, by the way, I have identified the source. I mean, it doesn't mean everybody that follows that stuff, but QAnon is funded by the Black Lodge directly. They're really
no, I would have I thought it would be like the deep state or something like that, like some sort of
no.
experiment.
Maybe they fund the deep state, but they fund QAnon because they're not interested in our petty politics. They're interested in destructiveness. So
yeah, chaos, right?
They can set one group against another. They will, and they'll be egging on both sides. That's just the nature of the Black Lodge.
Okay, so signs and portents. Okay, has there been more of this stuff happening in recent years, given the kind of pseudo-apocalyptic events that have been happening across the world? I say pseudo because they're not apocalyptic yet, but in multiple areas we appear to be careening toward chaos, right? Without getting into sides and all that stuff. Lots of reckless decision making, and yeah.
When I started doing, I started doing research on the Black Lodge like in the 1960s. But when I started doing, updated research for the book, I was looking into the motivations for the Black Lodge. And for thousands of years, for reasons that I will mention momentarily, their focus was on our sun, our sun star, getting so temperamental that it caused basically total changes in the earth, and coming through as late as the 1930s and involving certain astronomers at well-known observatories, including
Donald Menzel. Oh, he's a little bit later, but
no. Yeah, he was a little later. Yeah, but he's certainly in there. But that the fixation on analyzing the sun kind of goes back to the early 1930s. An astronomer who allegedly was advised by a goblin.
Yeah, I've heard about this guy before. Olive, I think, talked about him. What was his name? He was at like Mount Palomar Observatory.
Yeah,
is that
correct? Right.
What was his name?
Up the road from one of the observatories, just Hale.
From JPL, right up the road from JPL in Pasadena.
Up the road from JPL and down the road from Georgia Adamski's compound.
Oh yeah. The one out in the desert near Big Rock. That one.
Giant Rock, yeah.
Giant Rock.
You're the second person who ever called it Big Rock.
I keep calling it that. I'm not good. I'm terrible at remembering it. But
usually people who know the lore call it Giant Rock because that's what it was called for, like the seminal 40 years that it spawned the entire contact movement. But I had this weird woman walk into my office back in the days when I had the UFO Cider office at the Broadview Plaza Shopping Center at my father's expense. And she said, "So are you involved with Big Rock?" And I said, "You mean Giant Rock?" That was in 1963, 64, somewhere in there. And from that time to this time, I haven't heard it called Big Rock. So there must be some significance there as well.
That was
Because
that was 80 years ago.
Now, it couldn't have been, because 80 years ago, I
64.
didn't exist.
Or
It
wait,
was 60 years ago.
probably 60 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm usually better at math than that. 60 years ago. If it was in 64, it was almost exactly 60 years ago.
Yeah,
That's weird.
it was something like that. It was, well, 64, I was out of the country, 63 and 64. I say that often because of my late friend, Harry Thornley's accused involvement in the Kennedy assassination. I said, well, I was halfway around the world at the time, which is true. I didn't even hear about it until 3 days later. Somebody heard it on the BBC, and a Canadian girl with the name Nile, N-I-L-E, she pronounced it Neely, and she came almost gleefully and said, "Your president has been shot." And I, oh, okay. I'm a Republican, but that's okay. It was an interesting time to be abroad.
Still hasn't been declassified. Those files still have not been declassified, or at least
No,
maybe they
but
were, but there's some that have not been, right?
Kerry was accused because he not only had known Lee Harvey Oswald in the Marine Corps, but had written a book about him called The Idle Warriors. So I think he got called to testify in the Garrison probe. But, I'm one of those people who thinks that Lee Oswald was a nutcase, and he probably, I have seen convincing evidence that he was a sharpshooter who was capable of being a lone assassin. I mean, there have been several assassins who have a background in the Marines, and they teach people how to use the rifle very effectively, which for the most part serves our purposes, but perhaps in that case it was a nut being given a peacetime lesson in how to corrupt the world. But again, we're going in a direction that,
we probably shouldn't. Right.
Friend Jim Mosley would say, dangerously close to the truth. Name of his
Yes, indeed.
book.
Indeed. So how did you get into the occult? How did you start, kind of, when you started in Thelema, where did it go from there?
Oh, it didn't start with Thelema. It started with low magic ceremonial magic in the 1960s. And then, first of all, I don't consider myself a Thelemite anymore. The reason for that is very simple. I feel like while there are some sincere people, especially the ones that are broken with the OTO or the so-called AA, or I guess it's so-called OTO too, although they have the legal right to the term, who call themselves Thelemites. When I got away from the OTO, and that's been 2005, so do the math on that one. That's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And while I still feel very betrayed, so I do not profess not to have a certain bitterness about my whole experience there. I also have a lot of knowledge, not the knowledge they intended to convey, but the knowledge of what can really go wrong with a top-heavy occult organization. But when I got away from that for a year or two later, I began to think in terms of, well, what is Thelema, because the death stroke, the final, there were a number, but the final stroke was at the last Noticon, that's the OTO National Convention, which I imagine has gotten a good deal smaller since then. But some of the attendees who are hardcore Thelemites, the supreme and most holy king of the U.S. Grand Lodge, my old buddy King Dave, as I call him, was getting "Long live the king, long live the king" over and over and over. And I looked at David because I thought he was going to say, no, that's a ceremonial title like bishop and blah, blah, blah. It has.
Just get into his head.
He had a look of pride on his face. And I thought, we've got to sit down and talk, because if I can't convince him that he doesn't have a crown on his head, literally, metaphorically, or otherwise, I'm out. But circumstances forbade me to do that, so I stepped down from all of my positions. And then in the spring, I published my infamous statement on the OTO, calling on the high leadership, without getting personal. But I said, you fail to initiate and other failures, you need to step down, which is, they wanted me to step down. So I'd already stepped down. We had an argument about that. They
wanted to make it look like, they made you do it, but you're like, I already did it.
You can't fire me because I quit. And it is like that. It depends on whose version you take. And I basically was done with it long before that. It was one step after another. I say sometimes I spent 10 years getting into the OTO, and I spent 10 years getting out of the OTO. And that's why I think it is kind of a cult. CULT, not occult. Because if you take that long to get out of anything, I don't know, but I used to hang around the Young Socialist Alliance when I was in graduate and postgraduate work at the U of A. Their parent organization, similar in size and structure to the OTO, not similar in philosophy, I assume. Ex-members who've been expelled still sell their newspaper on the street corners. And from that, I infer this is not a party, this is a cult. And I think that not just OTO, but the whole Thelemic communion, if you strip it down to its essentials, it's Ayn Rand with occult trappings. And
how did that happen? Like objectivism with occult trap? Like, how did that?
Objectivism basically says the same thing that Thelema says. The power
do what thou wilt
of the personal will overcomes all other considerations. And Aunt Ayn was big into that. She's probably rolling in her grave right now. But she was totally anti-occult. She was in even an anti-libertarian party. She said right-wing hippies, which says something about them and about her. But the fact is that hits it on the spot. And from that, I tree back to triumph of the will. And something I've seen that a lot of people have not seen, but it was shown to me by Billy Bob, the Grand Poobah of the OTO. He said, here, read this. So I'm sitting in his living room I think we were watching some porn film or something. And he hands me the book, Hitler as He Is, the English translation of Rauschning's Rauschning was a defector. He had been the head of the one of the provinces of Nazi Germany, and he defected to England. And there's a lot of controversy whether he gilded the lily a lot. But there's the same thing about Albert Speer. When he got out of jail, he wrote, or he had published the diary that he wrote on toilet tissue in Spandau prison inside the Third Reich, and then he wrote another book. I think very, very valuable stuff. Of course, he was trying to distance himself from the Holocaust, and in fact, he testified against several Nazis that had been trapped since he got out of prison. So you can disown these people, or you can take them seriously. One of the people that apparently took Rauschning very seriously was one Aleister Crowley. And this particular copy that Billy Boy gave me to read, why I don't know to this day. I read the whole thing. I had read the book before, but I read the liner notes in Crowley's handwriting. They were, this was when I was still a Thelemite. I wouldn't have been at Bill's.
So by Crowley's actual hand, his side notes scribbled in.
Yeah. Not scribbled, very nicely annotated, no mistaking it. He was, how shall I put it, much more sympathetic to Hitler than he should have been. And when I got through reading it, I handed it back to Billy Boy. And he said, this one's going to have to stay in the vault for another 20 years. And I filed that under, hey, Bill, I'm Jewish, and didn't make a point of that. But the fact is, I don't know, maybe it was a test or something, but I knew how to play the game. So, if he told me,
you just didn't react. You just didn't react.
In the ninth degree, we teach how the Jews are responsible for it at all. I'd say, well, I'll get to that when I, get to the 12th degree that we don't talk about. Okay. I think if that were public with the liner notes, you probably would have a revised opinion of Crowley and therefore of the Lema. I mean, you can distance yourself from Crowley and say, I'm a Thelemite because I believe in the true will. But what do they mean by the true will? What do the people that encapsulated mean by that? And it's something very close to Ayn Rand, and before her,
Nietzsche.
Well, that's skipping a generation. Nietzsche would have been appalled at the Nazis, but he was appalled at his friend Wagner for his anti-Semitism. But let's say he was misused by the Nazis, and Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph, the villain. Yeah, it's a great movie. People should see it. I kind of require it, but it's a great movie as propaganda for the Nazis and specifically for Adolf Hitler. And I think the title is not frivolous. Triumph of the National Will. No. I saw a message there. Sorry, I don't look at the messages.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Let me disabuse you. Just because a guy wrote a book saying he was a spy doesn't mean he was a spy for our side. The fact is, in World War I, he was working with a German newspaper in New York. He wouldn't go back to England because he'd come over on the Lusitania and on its way back to England on one of its many trips, the Lusitania encountered a U-boat and was sunk. So he stayed in New York and rode the war out over here and professed after the fact that he was always working for our side, quote unquote, from his diary, which I've read. I think the likelihood is that he attempted always throughout his career, but especially towards the end, to get some kind of a respectability. He posed he looked remarkably similar to Winston Churchill, the hero of the hour. So he would pose with holding up the V sign, which he claimed to have given to Churchill. Unlikely. And with a cigar in his mouth, it was, it's basically a guy who had at that time maybe a dozen followers, maybe, who aspired to be a world teacher. And the end of his life is pretty sad, actually. But
yeah, the heroin addiction.
I think he offered to give advice on astrology when he heard that Hitler followed an astrologer, which is highly debatable. But that he was an agent for MI5 or something is that you would have to prove it, and it has it's unconvincing. He had a card from an admiral who was associated with MI5 or MI whatever, but I don't doubt that he attempted to get in touch with the British government, and everybody had business cards in those days. It was the English thing to do. It was the European thing to do. I used to have business cards, and I would hand them out to Alan Greenfield, ufologist extraordinaire. And people started saying to me, "Oh, that's such a European thing to do." So stop doing it. It's just like it was considered a put down. And at the time, I thought, yeah, okay, good point. I'll stop now.
All right, there's a question for you. I'm curious too. Can Alan reveal what current 93 means in Thelema?
Well, I could say, not entirely frivolously, whatever the people who fancy themselves Thelemites want it to be. Does it mean personal will? Does it mean the national will? Does it mean some impersonal will that you tune into? It's a kind of a cipher for do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, from Liber Vel Legis, the Book of the Law, which was either written by Rose Crowley or by Aleister Crowley or by a player human intelligence named Iwas, who was possibly a secret chief, probably, actually. I have my own take on that, which is a radical one, and it will not endear me to people who are still believers in that stuff.
You might as well go there, Alan. You might as well go there. As long as it doesn't,
Well, let me give this disclaimer. I have a few friends who still consider themselves Thelemites, and what they have done is they've separated themselves from the organizational Thelema, either by forming their own non-top-heavy organization or becoming free illuminists or whatever, or they simply are anti-organizational but still consider there to be something of worth there. I don't see it, but I do respect them as individuals because they're doing what I think is correct, which is free illuminism, whether they call it that or not. And, I encourage people to interact with other free illuminists on the worldwide free illuminist site on Facebook. But if you sign up for that, nobody makes you swear oaths, blood oaths at that. Nobody takes your money. Nobody is the hierarch who tells you what to do. I was recently elected the Grand Kafka of the World Association of Egyptian Obedience. It's a very high honor. The first person in Western civilization to hold that title was the Comte de Cagliostro. But it's an elective title now, and I only hold it for the next 2 years, and then it will pass to somebody else, because it doesn't imply that I have papal infallibility or anything remotely resembling that. So there is a difference between being in the hierarchical bodies and being sworn to obey the leader, or in the case of certain configurations of Golden Dawn derivation, obey the the chief, the outer chief of the order, and that would include the AA claimants, one of whom just died a couple of days ago, and was one of the people expelled by Marcello Moda, who later claimed, well, Moda was a valid leader of the AA when I was given my titles in the AA. The guy we're talking about is Daniel Clay Gunther. May he rest in peace. But he was insane after he threw me and the other leaders of one version of the current AA out of the organization. Well, none of them are psychiatrists insofar as I know. So the remaining people, that sounds really bogus to me. I don't think Billy Boy or King Dave are crazy people. I think they're wrong. Bill, I'm not sure about sincerity. Dave is absolutely sincere, but they have fallen into the Lord Acton abyss, which is power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You're given ultimate power, and it's ad vitam for life. That is an invitation, even if you start out being a sincere seeker yourself, or being your leader, So I don't think Aleister Crowley was a spy for the Allies in World War II. I don't think he was exactly a Nazi sympathizer, because the Nazis were bombing London, and he was a British patriot, or fancied himself such. But that doesn't mean he wasn't sympathetic to British fascists, of whom there were quite a few at the time. Sir Oswald Mosley being the famous example.
Well, I mean, there were some in America too at the same time, right?
Yeah, so, but they were sent to jail. I mean, the interesting thing is the occult movement in America, for the most part in the 1930s and 40s, were overlapping with the silver shirts, which I talk about all this in the Black Lodge books. There are a lot of dirty linen involved in the occultists of that period. Allegedly, William Dudley Pelley, who was head of the Silver Legion or Silver Shirts, while he was in prison, he was incarcerated after Pearl Harbor, began to channel the aliens and set up an organization which to this day has descendant bodies which have a decidedly, how shall I put it, because I don't think something right of center is necessarily wrong of center. Uh, Extreme right wing, i.e., crypto fascist anyway, slant on life, on things, and problems with their authoritarianism, because the things that they channel support that. So don't have trade unions. Yeah. Okay. Well, the Pleiadians tell me, and I don't care what the Pleiadians say, we don't live in the Pleiades. So that was the scene, and it traces back to Pelly and George Hunt Williamson. And if you want to read about it, I go into enormous detail in the Black Lodge book.
I'm gonna hit you with something that just hit my head. Mead Lane and the BSRA folks, how do they fit into all this?
Okay, there is another side. There always is. One lesson from the martial arts, which I learned early in life, is for every move, there is a counter move. And for every successful move by the Black Lodge, there's certainly a counter move by the secret chiefs. And I must say vice versa as well. Mead Lane was both free ufologist. I'm trying to think of a term, because the term UFOs didn't come about until the sort of almost
they kind of saw UFOs coming, right?
Yeah,
or they
called them ether ships, but
mm-hmm.
Mead Lane formed what was then called Borderland Sciences Research Associates, and for 15 years was at the helm of that, and until his death in around 1960, I guess. And he walked that delicate road that I tried to walk, which is one foot in the occult and the other foot in what became ufology. And he had his own kinks, but he was a righteous dude. And I would say that BSRA, now called BSRF, the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, I think, they have generally followed in his interest areas, but I would say there have been no occult initiates on the leadership of the BSRA / BSRF since Mead Lane. But he was a pivotal figure in the early days of trans-channeling and ufology, and the trans-channels that he worked with were, to the best of my knowledge, all channeling white light stuff, not Black Lodge stuff. So that's where he fits in. He comes along at the same time that Belly is starting to peddle his trans-channel stuff, or, in quotes, trans-channel stuff. On radio, that was quote marks.
Yeah. Quote. And then where does this, now I'm going to go way off. This could be connected. It could be wildly off. So forgive my ignorance. Where does the raw material come in with all this? Is there any linkage between the two, or is that completely separate?
Well, it may have started completely separate, but I would say, having known the Light Lines people personally at the peak of the period where the raw material was being produced by Don Elkins, who was famously, well, maybe infamously, an Eastern Airlines pilot by day and a trans-channeler by night, which somehow delights me.
Well, I think you told a story about the Psychic Friends Network or something like that, where there were two, or you talked to Eastern Steward,
No.
Eastern Airlines stewardesses or something. Sorry.
No, I was on
Jump
Psychic Friends Network.
Yeah,
and,
you. Yeah, that's what I was.
did I say that? No, I didn't do
Yeah.
any editorials there. I strictly stuck with the readings, and despite the imitators like the Psychic, whatever it was called, network of that
The
lady
Madame Cleo, all that stuff. Yeah.
Cleo, yeah. We were, I don't know how accurate everybody was because we had like 900 people manning the phones all across the universe. But we were straight up. We were vetted even by people that they had that were shills for the network to make sure that we weren't gilding the lily, or, that was the era of 900 numbers. We weren't steering people to the principal 900 numbers, which were basically the what's it called on the internet? The
Dark web.
the Pornhub of their day. No, we're nowhere near the dark web.
Smut materials. Yeah. Smart.
Yeah, we were. I even got a few calls that said, "Well, will you talk to me now? I'm lying down and I don't have any clothes on." I said, "Do you want a reading? Okay, let's see. Stick to what we're good at, not what they're good at."
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are tales to be told there. I could do a whole program on my 5 years with the Psychic Friends Network. Underpaid, underemployed, but absolutely straight up. So anyway,
Eastern Airlines pilot. Yeah.
John Elkins and Carla Ruker and the guy who I guess runs the archival group now, whose name I always forget, which I'm sorry, because he's the one who took me aside and told me, "You're going to have to decide between doing the occult thing or doing the political thing, because you're trying to straddle both, and I don't think you can do it. My guidance is you can't." And I said, "Well, he was right." But Carla, who I knew very well for a long time, and Don Elkins, they were as straight up as the people on Psychic Friends. They even had this very humble attitude. They were in Kentucky, that was their headquarters. They said, "We can teach anybody to be a trance channel, but we make no claims for the material that we channel. However, the best of their work, at least in their own eyes, was the raw material, which was in a similar vein to the Seth material, which the authenticity of which is rarely challenged by anybody, because the material itself internally makes sense. So if it internally makes sense, whether it's coming from the ancient Egyptian god Ra, or from their own psyches, is almost irrelevant, because what's the difference? So are they honest, and is what they, yes, and is what they channel worthwhile in some way? And the answer is yes. I'm not a particular fan of their of the raw material, but I am a fan of their methodology, which is anybody can channel, and channeling, while channeling, you channel whatever is there. But then you put on that skeptic hat that I talked about and say, is this material worthwhile? And does it have any evidential value? Something that I got from my past association with the Society for Psychical Research in England, the oldest group of that sort, and still one of the best.
And how do you know who or what you're channeling has your best interests in mind?
Sometimes it's amenable to cipher analysis or anagram analysis. For example, the being that calls itself Ashtar, that channels through many different people. First of all, the fact that it channels through many people suggests to me that it's a real source outside of the channeler, because it's channels to people who've never heard the term before. Now, of course, even if they just read it in my book, they know what Ashtar is, but also on the internet, there are very few secrets. Ashtar command, whatever. But what was not known when it started to show up with multiple channelers is that Ashtar is the name of a medieval demon from all of the demonology books that went before. And of course, the channelers were all white light types who would be oblivious to that. But us occult types were never oblivious to that. Ashtar, hey, that goes back to the medieval demon Ashtar, who conned people into thinking, well, he came to America when things got too hot for him in Europe, but he is not a fallen angel. He is a sincere convert to the white light. Sure. And Ashtar, in turn, there goes my voice. I won't gargle on the air. Ashtaroth, one of the demonic gods of antiquity that encouraged.
It's in the Goetia. That's in the Goetia, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Goetia, well, is late medieval, but probably influenced and not known until the 20th century by the Greco-Egyptian papyri, which in turn were influenced by primordial Heka, the ancient, really ancient Egyptian magic. So we're talking about, the earliest kinds of magic, and out of that, among other things, comes Ashtaroth. A bad dude, and sometimes male and sometimes female, which is also characteristic of various malevolent beings like Lilith, which I'm not going to play my son's movie, but
what movie? What movie? Because now I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch it now because your son's a screenwriter, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, right now he's. I can't say that he's writing wrestling because it's all unrehearsed, But no, it's not a dark song. Don't. That's a
great movie.
That's one of the two that I would say is very authentic, and I recommend it to people that are.
That is an extremely creepy movie, like extremely creepy.
But that's the way an Abra Mellon work actually works, except for purposes of a movie, they condense it time-wise. They show a considerable amount of time. Did someone just say something naughty about me?
No, just say you have a gazillion books about UFOs. It's a compliment. It's an internet compliment.
It's not a gazillion. It's about 10, and they're all available on Amazon and a number of other fine booksellers wherever fine books are sold.
That's right.
14, 15, 16.
All right, but you were saying a dark song. It's compressed. And we still have to figure out what your son's movie is, but we'll get back to that because I want to watch it anyway, and I think the audience should watch it.
I think it's on Hulu, but all of his movies eventually wind up on all those streaming streaming services.
Well, what's it about? It's about is it about Lilith?
It's about Lilith, and it's also shows a Jewish version of an exorcism.
Is it called Lullaby?
Yes, it is.
There you go.
Not to be confused with the Mexican film of the same name that came out within a month of it, which created some confusion. But Lullaby is the exorcism, and it is authentic because I referred Alex to the literature on that. And of course, he grew up with it anyway. Yeah. So
yes, everybody check out Lullaby. Now, you said there were 2 movies. There's Dark Song. What was the other one that can give people a
Lullaby.
sense? Lullaby. Okay. Okay.
Not since Jacques Tournier's 1950s film has different titles, so I'm not sure which one it goes by, but it's based on Passing the Runes by M.R. James, and
M.R. James is an excellent author.
Yeah. Well, Passing the Runes is an excellent story, and Tournier adapted it rather freely to a film in the late 1950s, which I'm trying to think of the name that you would be able to find it under.
You're raising
Mark of the
so
Beast.
many, like, okay, you're
Mark
raising
of-
so
Mark-
many questions in my head right now that are all over the place, but I think they're relevant. Are you familiar with any writing by Algernon Blackwood?
Oh yeah, in fact, Synchronicity. I just republished a story by Algernon Blackwood for my readers.
The Willows?
No, I mean, my favorite story by Blackwood is The Man Who the Trees Loved.
Oh
Which I
yeah.
recommend.
Oh yeah. He walks out into the
and-
woods and it's singing and kind of
Mhm.
yeah, it's a good. I mean, the Willows is kind of it's a little bit different, but yeah, he's got some interesting. There's another one where there was people summoning a discarnate entity in the same building and the floor above, and he kind of. Anyway, I sorry, I don't mean to take it there, but I love me some Algernon Blackwood from time to time.
Are you aware that he was a member of the Golden Dawn?
No, I had no idea.
The real Golden Dawn, the original, as was Bela Lugosi. No, I don't think so.
But you could tell there was some serious knowledge, and like the way he writes, there's a level of verisimilitude that you don't get with other,
Arthur Machen was a member, and Bram Stoker was a member. So a lot of the occult fiction that came out had some inspiration in participation in the turn of the 20th century Golden Dawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a few authors. You talked about M.R. James, you talked about Arthur Machen. I'm trying to think if there's Algernon Blackwood, and I'm probably missing 2 or 2 more.
Blackwood also, maybe you don't know this piece of trivia.
I probably don't. I just enjoyed his story.
He was the first person to go on BBC television and tell scary stories. At the very end of his life, he was known as the Ghost Man because he.
Interesting.
The BBC was, well, all of television was pretty simple in that period. But he'd sit in a chair, face the camera, probably only one camera, and read a scary story, which was very popular at the time. So he had a very storied career.
Yeah, he's an interesting man.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what is the state of the modern occult right now? Like, is it kind of decentralized, dispersed? Are there still some centralized areas? Or
there are still centralized bodies because they claim descent, which is somewhat skady, from these august, legendary organizations, which may or may not be as advertised, because everything grows with time. If it starts out with mystical properties, it's
Well, then you
just the way
have the
things.
iron law of bureaucracy, right? Where you have organizations that care more about the preservation of the organization than the original intent of the organization.
My perception is these organizations were, for the most part, revived by people who were part of the psychedelic revolution, the hippie thing from the late 60s and early 70s. And they're no longer young, the ones that are still alive. People who were extremely indulgent during that period don't necessarily live really long lives, you know. I mean, you can recite the number of rock stars, except the Rolling Stones, of course.
Yeah, they wouldn't have passed the marshmallow test, right?
Yeah. So, absolutely. But the organizational trend that grew up in the 1970s and 80s, I think, being outside of them now, I can't really speak to their current membership, but I think that it's gotten smaller and smaller. And I can even envision a day that what happened to those organizations when they fell into fighting amongst themselves in the early 1900s happens again, which is they basically disappear, except for a few people that try to carry on the work in subsequent bodies. What has happened, more interesting to me, is that whereas I've been an advocate for 40 years, maybe, of there being a continuity amongst ghost lore, fairy lore, UFO lore, or cryptid lore. I see them as all part of a spectrum. Where that spectrum is generated, I'm not sure. And even bringing in some of the esoteric of quantum physics as all part of a spectrum, the message of which is reality is malleable, and there may be more than one reality right here, right now, which drives the nuts and bolts people nuts.
It shouldn't, because it's just like the radio. You just go to a different frequency, and you still have music that's playing simultaneously. It's not hard to understand, right? I mean, that's probably an imperfect analogy, but
no, it's a great
probably
one. I use it all the time. So the scientists are trying to prove or disprove the existence of God or the afterlife or something, and they keep tuning different frequencies on their radio, and they hear different voices, and they're analyzing the voices, and they use these, you know, these what were they called? Truth detectors. They were supposedly, from the sound of the voice, you could tell a lie detector thing.
Oh,
they were like polygraphs, but they were strictly on voice, and I think are less reliable even than polygraphs, who are sort of reliable.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yes, they can be beaten, especially by someone who is crazy and really believes whatever they're saying. However, I think polygraphs are useful outside of a courtroom. They're no longer admissible in court. I don't know about this voice thing, but anyway.
Well, I know. I'm pretty sure the CIA still uses them, right, when they bring people in. So
the CIA probably still uses LSD or you know, whatever.
Or the internet.
By the way, I'm not, as many people are in these fields, I'm not anti-CIA. I think they've kept us at nuclear peace among other bodies since 1940. 25.
They're like any organization. There's good people and there's bad people, and sometimes they do good things. Sometimes they do MK Ultra. Right? It just all depends.
Yeah, well, sometimes they do experimental things and they don't work very well, or they work wrong, or somebody winds up going out the window. And sometimes they do very dark things that are nevertheless in the interest of the United States of America and
Right.
world peace. And so I'm not on the bandwagon there. And I'm hearing another voice coming in. Wait.
I have a a developmentally disabled daughter who stims sometimes, so that's just her in the background.
That's fine. And tell her to channel for us. And
I like a one sentence story. I had a dream once where she doesn't communicate well, but I had a dream where she was communicating perfectly fine and lucidly. It was weird, but anyway, that's it. I'll stop the sentence. Yeah,
that's very interesting. That's interesting. My mother, in her later years, she was the youngest of 12. My grandmother had my mother when she was 48. It happens, but she thought she was done. So anyway, being the youngest of 12, she had all kinds of a fund of stories. Some of them were born in the old world. My mother was born in rural Georgia. Rural. Do you know how long it took me to pronounce rural properly?
What'd you say, rural?
Rural. I would
rural.
Say from the rural south. Yes. So where was I going with that?
We were talking. I think we were talking about children and.
Well, yeah, there is spontaneous channeling, where some people can channel. Oh, yeah, my mother's told me in old age, when all of her brothers and sisters had passed on, because they kind of died they all lived very long lives, but they kind of died in order, from the oldest to the next to the youngest, which was, I guess, awful for my mom and was not great for me, but being an only child. She said, I have a lot of dreams about my brothers and sisters, but in my dreams, they're all young. Well, I dream every now and then about my parents, but it's always in the house that I grew up in, which is about 3 blocks from here, as I often say. But I mostly dream about my children, all of whom are adults now. But in my dreams, they are as they were when they were relatively small children.
Why is
I think that's I'm a parapsychologist, not a psychologist. I guess it's wish fulfillment of a sort, or hope, or basically that under the man is the boy, under the woman is a girl, and that's never lost. And I guess that would be what you're experiencing there, because I think, again, you twiddle. I started to go for the radio thing. You're twiddling with the knobs on the radio itself, but the radio doesn't have any intelligence. The radio isn't broadcasting. The radio requires there to be someone in the studio, and the real person you're listening to is in the studio. And if that person happens to be you, they're speaking perfectly and well, and they're in the studio. So maybe you're hearing your daughter from the studio. So you might take note of what she says in perfect speaking. I
Yeah,
don't mean
it
to get
felt like
personal there.
no, it felt like a conversation. I don't remember what the conversation was, but while we're speaking about dreams, I'm going to tell you another strange one I had a few nights ago. There was somebody I knew who was like lifting weights, and I just knew it wasn't. I knew they were quote unquote an interloper, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And they kind of had a reaction like, "Okay, you got me," and then showed me how they could just change their appearance. So they were just cycling through different like men, right? So like an Indian man, a black man, a white man, an old man. And then I said, "Is that all you can do? Can't you do some women?" So then they, started converting into women. Can't you show me some more attractive? And they did, but it was weird. It was stepping back. It was like there was a trickster, and I caught them. And they're like, "Okay, you got me. Let me show you some tricks." I have no idea what that dream meant, but that was what it was. But very elusive. Like I could tell you, the first woman that he showed me was a redhead that had like a butterfly tattoo on her left, like just above, above her. Anyway, you get where I'm going. But it was very lucid.
Are you going there? Tell me the truth.
No. I mean, it was just, it was just on the bare skin, but you couldn't see, you couldn't see anything inappropriate. Not that that's not bad in the dream, but anyway, what was that like? When you have dreams, like this was something that was not for me, and it was in my dream, and I caught it, and it was like, okay, them's the rules. You got me. What's that all?
I think that it was a trickster, and tricksters are not bad. They're not black.
Yeah,
or
I didn't get like a malevolent sense. It was like I don't know. I can't
If you
even...
get the trick, that's what they're trying to get you to. A lot of people don't get it, so it just remains as if it were capricious. But if you get it, they stop playing, because that's the point. You're supposed to see the inner side of the Joker. I don't mean the Marvel thing. I mean the the Joker in the deck, or the Fool, or whatever, in the original sense of fool. The court jester, the trickster. Okay, I got off something. I didn't get off on it, but I got to the subject of what has happened in the occult world, and I've got to bring that up to the present, because the aging occultists who started the most recent occult revival, their formula is no longer the formula of the moment. The secret chiefs gave up on them a long time ago. The formula that is taking place now are people that started out. Again, I see all these things as related. It didn't start out with the academic parapsychologists, which I sort of expected for a long time, because they are so underfunded, and they're trying to do the mainstream thing, I think very commendably. But the fact is, I don't care how much evidence they accumulate, they will never impress the mainstream until there is a radical paradigm shift.
Right.
And that won't come from them. It will come from elsewhere. So there are people who started out as ghost hunters, amateurs, not the ones you see on TV so much. They're kind of ditzy, most of them. But you have ghost hunters, and you have not cryptozoologists per se, but Bigfoot hunters, cryptid hunters, cryptid catalogers. They're not. And then you have ufologists, or as I like to call myself, a ufologist because of,
And like the new Kirks, like the new Kirks might be an example of that, right?
I was about to mention them because
I know.
they are the
That's where
prize
we're going.
they're the prize example. If you want to know where the future of this work is, it's not in the Golden Dawn or the other Golden Dawn. It's not in the AA or the other AA or the other AA. It's not even in BSRF or any of the other established occult bodies. It's with people who do research at home, who have a background in field investigation, who do field investigations, and don't stick to their original premise, whatever that happened to be, but in fact follow the synchronicities. And who better than the excellent team assembled by Greg and Dana Newkirk, who have become famous people. And I hope they don't become, autograph seekers, because they are the future of this. And if others emulate them, that's where the future is. I'm not yet the past, but I'm headed that way. It's just the nature of things.
Yeah, but you have a lot of knowledge to pass on, and
I pass the baton as best I can. And to their credit, they seem to, take account of what I have to say, although they have their own approach, and I think they are aces all the way.
All right, now I think we have, let's see, about 16 minutes left because this ends at 10 after. So let's talk egregores, thought forms, tulpas, and what have you. Okay, so can, like a soccer team, the energy that they generate. And I've asked, I have another interview coming up with Tom Montauk, we talked about earlier. In fact, I talked to him next week live, but we talked about some of these topics. But even a YouTube channel, does the energy that these things put out, do they create egregores, and how do those egregores manifest? And what's the whole nature of this thing, hypothetically?
Well, again, I think that reality is malleable. I don't think the human mind, which I don't think is the gray matter. This is the radio.
It's the antenna. It's the antenna, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the antenna for the radio, which is the gray matter.
Yeah, the processor, right?
And it's that's even more modern. But I go back to radio days because I'm old, and the fact is there weren't no TV in Augusta, Georgia when I came along. So for the first 5 years of my life, it was listening to gangbusters on the radio with my folks, which was an experience. But I won't even tell you about the end of the show. They gave the description of some felon who was out there, and my mother and I were on a bus, and I said, "There's the guy from Gangbusters. It's wanted dead or alive," which was one of my lesser moments as a child. So let's say the computer processor is not. I think this will become more true as if quantum computing becomes all that it is cracked up to be. And I'm not sure, because fusion has been just around the corner since the 1950s, and it's always just around the corner. And if I were an investor, I would say, wait it out. It's not necessarily going to be the next big thing. But I know, because I've made it my business to know a good deal about the quantum underpinnings of reality. And we are awash in them. We are them. And the locus of each of us is in some remote words will fail me here. Location, but take location with a grain of salt. Therefore, it means that in a sense we are immortal beings in mortal form in the process of becoming, with the secret chiefs who are immortal beings who have ascended from human states to almost equally advanced adepts who are also non-corporeal and immortal, therefore, who have chosen to be into that triumph of the will that we were talking about earlier, and they constitute.
But help humanity. Oh well, yeah, those guys. Yeah, no, but
they're
one group
trying.
that wants to help humanity. There's another group that wants to drag people down.
Right, and if you take those as being non-corporeal, but knowing that we are, as of as long as we're here, corporeal beings in a malleable structure that produces all kinds of weird shit. Pardon me. Yeah, FCC or whatever.
That's fine. We made it a long time. I with other guests, I don't even make it that long. So you're doing better than most.
It's all on record. And I've been the least profane that I've been on any program ever. And that's because you got me started on stuff that I'm really into, and I only get profane when I'm frustrated.
I'm glad I got you into stuff that you don't feel profane about. That's good.
Okay.
That means it's a good interview.
So let's bring this down home and say that if we are in fact the station, quote unquote, and not the device that we're using to tune into the station. In other words, we're the cloud, we're the internet, or we're the complexity that constitutes the cloud, so to speak. I don't mean that this is literally what we have in the way of computer technology is as nothing compared to the complexity of the universe. So there's rhythm and order in the universe. We see it in certain mathematical formula, and we also see it in the realization of those formula. You know, the chaos effect, the Fibonacci sequence sort of shows up in butterflies and in galaxies. So
and
it's
in
all
the Nautilus, yes,
yeah, and the Nautilus and a gazillion things. So, and probably some that we don't even recognize it as such yet. But I think that the way spirals are used in magic is an effort to tune into that. The point being, the bottom line on your question is, I think that we are capable, if we become magically adroit, and that follows on being mystically adroit, which comes from meditation, of generating tulpas. And the tulpas actually take on their thought forms. The great secret inside the OTO has to do with the bud will, which is a thought form generated in a particular way using human materials.
I get where you're going. You're talking about some kind of certain kind of ritual.
The TV people will get this.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The material basis of the tulpa makes it into something very real. My favorite analogy from the movies is very old, but also a favorite of mine, which is Forbidden Planet, and the creatures from the id that are basically from an augmented technical reality that creates what amounts to demons from the id. Well, they're not all demons, but that is what a tulpa is basically all about. It's the generating of these temporary beings, which account for some of the men in black cases, not all. Some of those are hanky-panky from the CIA, which goes back to the 1953 conclusion of the CIA panel, which, by the way, J. Allen Hynek has often been lionized by nuts and bolts ufologists. I knew Allen Hynek slightly. I didn't know him well, but he was on the CIA panel that decided that private UFO groups were a bad idea and something needed to be done about them. And then came the Condon Committee, and then came the disclosure movement, and then came all of these shills for ridiculous theories. So I'm not sure where Hynek stood on that. When last I talked to him, he had become pro-UFO and was still with the government, but shortly thereafter, they fired him. So,
Well, that's a good sign. It means he's right over target. He's probably had the right thing in mind.
In a manner of speaking, they replaced him with Dr. Edward U. Condon. And Condon was real into saying the trick will be to convince people we are open-minded, but actually we're here to poo-poo the whole thing. I am paraphrasing liberally from one of his associates, but we have a similar thing going on now, and I'm trying to get the nuts and bolts people to avoid the great disappointment, as they call the 19th century, the second coming of Jesus, and then the third coming, and then the fourth coming, until they finally became Seventh-day Adventists. That's literally true, folks.
The beatings will continue until morale improves, as tends to be the government's policy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the newest conception, if you look at, I'm in the middle of reading Imminent by Luis Elizondo, and they're letting a little bit of the parapsychological into the, let's call it the, I don't know, lure's not the right word, but in the intelligence community calls these things a modified limited hangout, where they're like, okay, people know this is true. Let's just tell them what we're comfortable with telling them, or a cover story that's reasonably believable, and hope it goes away after that. So this story is that we do have craft. There are three factions. There's the faction that wants disclosure. There's the faction that wants that's called the Legacy Program, that wants to keep it in, and then there's the Collins Elite, which is the religious fundamentalists who it's all demons, it's all of it demons, which I'm sure it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But,
a lot more.
Yeah, of course. But that's kind of the official story. And I say official story because whenever you have someone who comes out with disclosure, they don't get time on CNN. They don't get time in the New York Times. They don't get time on ABC and CBS, but this guy does. So, I'm not saying what he's saying is not true. I'm just saying what he's saying is the officially sanctioned narrative. True or untrue, I don't know.
That always follows, that kind of quasi sort of disclosure always follows popular, mostly fictional explorations into those same areas. X-Files was followed by a flurry of interest in UFOs. There are several TV shows devoted to Bigfoot, and there are rumors that Bigfoot comes out of UFOs. There are some fair witness cases of that. And then there are the scientists who worked for the CIA and then for Stanford Research Institute, and then other things later than that, that disclosed what they were doing with the far
Remote
reach type stuff.
remote viewing. Yep.
Yeah, remote viewing. And then they start in on the comical version of the men who stare at goats, which is funny, which is sort of true, but nevertheless.
Alan, I know those guys. I interviewed I talked to Lynn Buchanan a lot. Like that stuff's real. That whole
I didn't say it
movie
wasn't
was like a
real.
yeah.
But the movie
I know.
is meant to be humorous in order to say, oh, this is interesting, but of course.
Yeah, discredit it.
All part of the act. Nothing to see here. Move on, folks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's meant as a discredit. Well, I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but I think you and I are saying the same thing. It's meant to make it humorous so that people don't spend any time. Because if you're a spy agency, the worst thing that can happen is a housewife in Illinois can remote view a meeting at the CIA in Langley, Virginia, right? And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Well, there might be, but that's a whole other.
That's a whole different can of worms. And they send you to the wrong places. I mean, I pretty well know what's being done at Area 51, and I have the same attitude there that I have about the CIA. They keep us safe with these splendid developmental weapons. You'll notice these very flying saucer looking will eventually replace the B-52s, which have been, I guess they're B-52s because they've been in service since 1952. But the new stealth bombers look remarkably UFO-like. But of course, they've established, Area 51 is where the flying saucers crashed from Roswell, New Mexico, which has been good for the tourist industry in Roswell. But the truth is, wherever it's named, it's unlikely that that's where the phenomena is coming from.
It's kind of interesting that didn't Parsons around that time do some sort of the Babylon working or something like that before 1947? It was like in 46 or 47, something like that.
Yeah, it was. But the thing is it was either 45 or 46. I'd have to look it up. But the deal is, it was very close to the time of the original Trinity nuclear test, and up until that point, and I guess I can close with this one because it's a long way down to go to this, but as is shown in the third season of Twin Peaks, because nuclear weapons have the potential for doing what the Black Lodges wanted the sun to do for thousands of years, which was the last time it really did it big. It maybe created the Younger Dryas, a very difficult period in earthly history, and which, by the way, the sun is being very temperamental right now. I try to cover.
Corona's pretty active. Yeah.
It's more temperamental than they expected it to be, and whatever stories start out, scientists say you're supposed to believe, but scientists said, solar maximum. It's not supposed to be this X2, X3, X4. It could stop us from doing this. Is one of the things. Also, it could
EMP, right? And it could also do it to just one continent or one face on the planet, which would mean one continent could be vulnerable to people who suddenly have electronics on the other side of the planet.
That's true. This side or
the other side.
It could be, hey, we're from China and we're only here to help. We're just here to help.
I know. So that being the case, when they witnessed as has been discussed elsewhere, the Trinity test, they immediately, parts of the Black Lodge began to hype up the Soviet American Cold War, hoping it got hot. Because, as I said, they don't give a tinker's damn about who wins. What they would like to see is the destruction of human civilization and, if possible, human life, because they are jealous of humans. I don't want to sound like the early chapters of Genesis, but it's somebody had some experiences way back when.
All right, Alan, any final words? Those are probably final words, but yeah.
Well, my final words are, I have many books, a plethora of books, and if you would like to get any of them, you can go to Amazon and get them quickly, or go to Barnes & Noble, or I have seen them advertised on a lot of booksellers. But I will tell you this, the Black Lodge book sometimes mysteriously disappears, and you have to really look for it on Amazon. I believe that's Black Lodge interference, because we had lots of interference all during the pre-publication period, and we're even working on a revised, updated edition, because we had a world of troubles, mostly directed at my publisher.
And if you look in the description below, there's a playlist for Dr. Alan Greenfield on my channel, that there's an episode that talks about all those woes. It's the episode about the real Black Lodge. So definitely check that out. And
I went on and
links,
on and on.
And on those links, there are links to these books. So definitely go there, watch the episodes, and then click on the links and buy the book. They're good books. So
thank you, Sean. You're the best.
You're the best for spending 2 hours with me, Dr. Greenfield. I appreciate it.
2 hours? I thought it was 15 minutes. Hey. I'm entitled to eat, you know. It's union rules.
Thank you, everyone. It's great seeing you.